HOA let members cut straight through a private farm, tearing down a gate and calling it community access. But when thorn bushes took root and federal signs went up, that shortcut turned into a battlefield. What started as quiet trespassing became a war for legacy, and the farmer made sure the last word was written in law, not footprints. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The day I found my livestock wandering by the road, I realized my farm wasn't mine anymore. Not really. I remember the sound before I saw them, hooves clacking against asphalt. An eerie echo too far from where they should have been. My cattle, slow-moving and gentle creatures raised under my father's watchful eye, were loose near the main road, grazing beside drainage ditches like they didn't belong anywhere. I slammed the truck into park, heart thudding against my ribs, as I jogged toward them, waving my arms and calling by name. Back, now, come on, Ruby. My boots sank into the shoulder gravel as I herded them back, one cautious step at a time. They weren't spooked, just lost, like they'd wandered through a door that shouldn't have been open. That's when I saw it, the back fence gaping wide open like the mouth of a wound. The old iron gate I'd padlocked for years, ever since the new subdivision crept up behind my property line, was gone, not swung open, not rusted off its hinges. Gone. I stared at the posts, now bare, their screws still embedded, but the gate vanished. No signs of damage. No debris. Just clean removal, like someone had plans for it. I stood there for a long while, one hand on the fence post, the other clenched so tight it hurt. My name's Evan. I've lived on this land since before I had chest hair. Inherited it when my father passed 5 years ago. 100 acres of pasture and peace, the kind of place where you learn to respect silence because it teaches you everything city noise never could. My father used to say, "Land's got memory, son. It remembers who walks it with care." I believed him. Still do. But that day, something shifted. The land wasn't just remembering anymore, it was warning me. Over the last year, the subdivision on the ridge had grown from 10 tidy homes to nearly 50. Cookie-cutter dreams, painted in beige, their neat lawns and SUVs humming in quiet unison. It didn't bother me at first. I kept to myself, let them have their little paradise. They waved. I nodded. Peaceful enough. Then the shortcut began. First, it was one teenager on a mountain bike. Then couples walking dogs, strollers, joggers. A narrow trail worn across my pasture like a scar, cutting from the back of the subdivision straight to the road through my land. I confronted one or two, got shrugs, the occasional apology. One woman said, "Oh, I thought this was part of the community trail." I told her it wasn't. She smiled like she didn't believe me. So I called the HOA. That's how I met her, Madeline Crane, president of the Homeowners Association. On the phone, she was syrup sweet. "Oh dear," she said. "I thought the easement was public. I'll have to check the maps." She sounded concerned. Even promised to call back. She didn't. A week later, I got a notice in my mailbox from the HOA. Community path now accessible by residents through approved easement access, coordinated for convenience and safety. It was printed on cream-colored paper, embossed with a little green tree logo. I nearly tore it in half. That was my land, my fence, my gate. And they had decided it didn't matter anymore. No phone call, no knock on my door, no request or courtesy. Just a backdoor decision, rubber-stamped and executed while I was out feeding horses or repairing fence lines. The betrayal wasn't loud, it was quiet, neat, polite. That's what made it worse. I walked that path every evening after that, watching them. Watching her too, Madeline waving at joggers, laughing at meetings. All blonde curls and pearls. Charming to a fault. The kind of person who smiled with her teeth, but not her eyes. That gate wasn't just metal and hinges, it was a line, and they'd crossed it without a second thought. That's when I knew I wasn't just living on inherited land anymore. I was guarding it. And war in this kind of place doesn't start with a bang. It starts with a gate left open. They carved a trail through my land like it was public property, like I was invisible. At first it was footprints. That's all. A faint trail worn into the tall grass where no path had ever been. Then came the bikes. then the dogs, then the leashes tangled in my fence posts, and the plastic bags full of waste left like gifts in the shade of my oaks. I stood at the edge of that path one morning, coffee in hand, watching a woman jog straight through my field like it was part of her morning routine. She didn't look at me, just kept her earbuds in and waved her smartwatch near her face. Then a golden retriever came bounding after her. No leash, just a blur of motion and fur. It nearly trampled a bed of wildflowers my dad and I had planted years ago right before he passed. And I stood there, feeling like a ghost on my own land. The next few days blurred into a sickening rhythm, bicycles kicking up dust, kids cutting through on the way to school, dog owners tossing tennis balls onto my pasture like it was some damn park. A week later, I found one of my side fences partially collapsed, 3 wooden planks splintered like someone had climbed over it, or worse, tried to drag a stroller through. That was it. I drove straight to the HOA office, which was nestled inside the subdivision clubhouse. Fake stone, fake shutters, real arrogance. Inside, Madeline Crane greeted me with that same politician's smile. "Oh, Evan. We were hoping to hear from you soon." I didn't sit, just held up a photo of the broken fence on my phone. "Explain this." She barely glanced at it. "That's unfortunate, but it shouldn't be a problem once the easement's fully respected." "What easement?" I asked, slower than I intended. My voice dropped an octave. She tilted her head, almost like I'd asked her how gravity worked. "The community easement, of course. It was in the development plans. Part of the original subdivision filing. Access corridor from Ridgeview Estates to Route 17. She said it like she'd rehearsed it. Because she had. "I never signed off on an easement." "Well," she said, walking around her desk. "It's part of the shared use policy that was on my deed." She paused. I knew right then she didn't have it. Or worse, she had something she shouldn't. She did that thing where people blink a little too long when they lie. The documents were filed with the county. It might have been part of a grandfathered land use agreement. You'd have to check with the municipal records. My heart thumped in my ears. "Then I'll do that." She smiled again. Tighter now. "Evan, this is temporary. The subdivision's road expansion is behind schedule. Once it connects to the main road, residents won't need to cut through. We're just asking for a little community cooperation." "No one asked," I said, turning on my heel. Outside, the sun was too bright, and the clubhouse too perfect. It made me nauseous. That night, I pulled out my father's deed again, tracing every word with a finger like it was scripture. No easements, no access rights. Just boundaries. Just names. But they were treating it like an eraser had been taken to everything that mattered. And the worst part, I didn't even know where to start fighting it. It felt like watching my home slowly fade into someone else's walking trail. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a landowner. I felt like a tenant. On borrowed dirt. I dug deeper, literally and legally, and what I found chilled me to the bone. The thing about land is, it doesn't lie. Fences lean, crops fail, seasons shift, but the ground stays where it was set. At least, that's what I always believed. Until someone tried to move the lines beneath my boots without ever setting foot on my soil. I drove to the county recorder's office the following Monday. The place smelled like dust and bureaucracy. Yellowed files, humming fluorescents, a printer that whined like it had a grudge. I waited 20 minutes for a woman named Shelley to pull my parcel file. She returned with a slim folder and a puzzled look. "This your property?" she asked, laying it flat on the counter. "Far as I know," I said. She flipped it open. The top sheet was dated just 3 months ago, after the back gate vanished. I froze. "Wait," I said, pointing at the form. "What's this?" She tapped the corner. "Updated plat map. Looks like a right-of-way was added. See the dotted line? A path thin, surgical cut through the southern tip of my land." It matched the worn trail joggers had stamped into my pasture. And next to the dotted line, like a slap to the face, was a name in fine ink. My name. Except it wasn't my signature. I've signed my name on fencing contracts, vet bills, bank loans. I know the curl of my E and the stubborn drop of my B. This looked like a bored intern trying to fake cursive. "Who filed this?" I asked, throat dry. Shelley scanned the line. "Submitted by Ridgeview Development. Not uncommon. Happens when the planning board signs off on expansions." You'd have been notified. I nodded slowly, heart pounding. And if I wasn't? Well, she said carefully. You'd need to take that up with a real estate attorney. I left the building feeling like my ribs had been hollowed out. The sun hit my face, but I felt cold. Violated? Whoever had done this hadn't just bent the truth, they'd redrawn it. I kept replaying that signature in my head. It gnawed at me all the way home. And then something clicked. It was the BBQ back in spring. A neighborhood event hosted by the HOA to build bridges between old and new residents. Madeline had worked the crowd like a congresswoman, in pearls, handing out lemonade and laughing too loud. She'd found me by the smoker, where I was turning ribs and trying to stay invisible. She leaned in too close that day, asked how I was adjusting to the new neighbors. Then she asked about my dad, how he'd managed the land, whether he'd kept old maps or records. I remember brushing her off, saying most of it was somewhere in the shed. She smiled. That smile, sugar dipped in arsenic. That night, I unlocked the old tool shed out back. Dusty, half collapsed from last winter's storms. Inside, beneath piles of scrap fencing and grease-stained tarps, I found the steel file box my dad used to keep contracts and maps. It took 20 minutes to sort through the chaos, but when I found the old survey dated 1992 and signed in thick blue pen, it hit me like thunder. There was no easement. Not in 1992, not in 2005, when he updated the boundaries after we sold 5 acres to the county. Not in 2016, when I inherited everything. No dotted line, no footpath, nothing. Just property lines, straight and clean. So how did my name end up on a forged plat map? It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was theft. Quiet, clever, deliberate theft. And Madeline Crane, with her HOA titles and sweetheart smile, had just made it personal. I stood in that shed for a long time, hands wrapped around the survey, thinking of my father's voice again. They can take your word, they can take your patience, but if they ever try to take your land, son, you better make damn sure they regret it. Now I understood what he meant. And I was just getting started. If they wanted to play legal chess, I'd start by flipping the board. I didn't yell. I didn't storm the HOA office or post rants online. That's not my style. My father always said a man who whispers while he sharpens his tools makes more noise than a man who screams empty threats. So I started digging. The path behind my property had become a thoroughfare, mud-packed and trampled into submission, like my rights. I waited until just after dusk, when the last dog walker passed through and the subdivision windows began to glow with evening shows and dinner clatter. Then I went to work. I'd picked them up from a nursery an hour away. Not just any plants. Osage orange, blackthorn, and hawthorn. Vicious, beautiful shrubs, thick, fast-growing, and more importantly, perfectly legal. The ground was soft from last week's rain, and under the beam of my headlamp, I planted every thorn like a quiet declaration of war. Root by root, I shaped a natural barricade. No signs, no fences, no warnings. Just nature doing what it was meant to do. Protect. By midnight, the path was no longer a path. It was a gauntlet. And in the morning, the war began. I was feeding Ruby and the other cattle when I heard the first shout. Something about a jogger getting scratched. Then came another, angry barks. A leash yanked hard, curses slung into the wind. By the time I walked to the back fence with my coffee, I saw Madeline standing on the other side, arms crossed, lips pressed into that familiar "I'm disappointed, but still superior" expression she wore like perfume. "Well," she said, "that wasn't very neighborly of you." I took a sip. Didn't know planting on my own land was a crime now. "You know exactly what I'm talking about." I smiled. Quiet, deliberate, like I was enjoying the sunrise. She stepped closer, her heels sinking slightly into the wet grass. "You've created a hazard. Someone's child could get hurt." I raised an eyebrow. "Maybe they shouldn't be cutting through private property. It's a community easement." "Still under review," I said. "Which means until it's proven legal, it's trespassing." Her jaw flexed. "I'll be bringing this up with the board." "Good," I said, setting my mug on a fence post. "So will I. I've already contacted a lawyer." The color drained from her cheeks just a bit. Not fear, not yet, but discomfort. The kind people get when they realize they've underestimated the wrong man. Her voice lowered. You're escalating this. No, I said calmly. I'm responding. She turned without another word, heels snapping against the path that was no longer hers to walk. And just like that, the lines had been redrawn, not in ink, but in roots and thorns and silence. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet, no joggers, no cyclists, just wind rustling through the new growth, and a few angry looks from across the fence. I kept working, mended a few rails, fixed a watering line, made sure the thorn bushes were watered and thriving. Behind the scenes, I began gathering everything. Old deeds, survey scans, photos of the trail before and after the plants. A statement from the nursery confirming the species and planting schedule. I even called the sheriff's office to file a complaint about trespassing. Nothing dramatic, just on record. Every action I took was measured, lawful, documented. Because this wasn't just about a path anymore. It was about setting a precedent. If I let them take this inch, the next would be a foot. Then 5 acres. Then my whole damn way of life. They wanted a gentleman's game, played in whispers and policies. Fine. But I knew how to make silence speak. I didn't just fight back. I posted signs that turned fear into leverage. I've learned that when people ignore your voice, you make them read your silence. So I gave them signs to read. Big ones. Bright yellow and black, stamped with bold federal text. USDA conservation land. No trespassing, protected under Federal Statute 16 U.S. Code. I planted them like flags on the perimeter of the trail. A dozen, maybe more. Each one backed by something they didn't expect. Authority. My father had started the USDA conservation easement process years ago, hoping to preserve parts of the pasture that still held native grasses and old-growth oak. He filed the initial paperwork, but never finalized it. Not after Mom got sick. After his funeral, I tucked the folder into the shed with everything else that hurt too much to look at. But now I pulled it out, dusted it off, and finished what he started. The new USDA agent I spoke with, kind man, sharp eyes, walked the property with me and shook my hand when we finished. Looks like your land still qualifies, he said. Especially with this kind of disturbance. Encroachment makes approval faster, ironically. I submitted the revised application with updated photos, environmental surveys, and a formal request to mark the land as in process, which gave me the legal right to warn off any foot traffic under federal environmental protection laws. It wasn't just a sign anymore. It was a shot across the bow. The very next day, Madeline came down my gravel road with 2 HOA members in tow. And a man I didn't recognize, probably their pet lawyer. She didn't bother with her usual smile this time. This is excessive, she said, nodding toward the signs. And possibly illegal. You're endangering our residents. By keeping them off my land? I asked. She handed me an envelope, a cease and desist, accusing me of creating a hostile perimeter and violating HOA aesthetics. I laughed. You're going to fine me for thorn bushes and signs on land you don't own. Her face flushed. You're not above community law, Evan. No, I said, calmly unfolding the USDA letter from my jacket pocket. But I am under federal protection. I handed it to the attorney. He read it. Didn't say a word. They left without another word, stomping over the gravel like it owed them something. 3 days later, I saw my own face on the evening news. Some local station ran a community spotlight piece about a reclusive farmer escalating conflict with homeowners over a disputed walking path. They aired drone footage of the thorns. A few angry HOA parents called me unstable on camera. The headline? The angry farmer and the path of thorns. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Because what they saw as escalation, I saw as a line drawn with steel roots. Let them talk. Let them twist the narrative. Let them airbrush their trespasses with community buzzwords. I'd already done the one thing that mattered. I changed the power dynamic. They used policy and politeness to take what wasn't theirs. I used patience, paperwork, and pressure. The thorns weren't just a barrier. The signs weren't just warnings. They were proof I wasn't alone anymore. I had the law, the land, and my father's legacy behind me. Let them call me angry. Anger built this country. And mine was just getting warmed up. They thought I'd be intimidated. But when the gavel hit the table, the truth started to bleed out. The town meeting was held in the Ridgeview clubhouse. Same beige walls, same forced smiles, same smell of overbrewed coffee. But this time, the air was different. Tense, electric. People filed in quietly, avoiding my eyes. A few whispered. One woman actually hissed something about the crazy farmer under her breath. Let them talk. I didn't come for them. The folding chairs were set up in neat rows. A small wooden podium at the front flanked by the HOA board. 5 members in matching green polos, and at the center of them all Madeline Crane. She wore red this time, power color, but it couldn't hide the tightness in her jaw. At exactly 6:00 p.m., the board president banged the gavel. We're here to discuss community concerns regarding the Ridgeview rear access trail and the recent behavior of adjacent landowner, Evan Mallory. The phrase made me smile. Behavior. Like planting bushes and enforcing property lines was a criminal act. Madeline stood, clasped her hands, and delivered a speech polished to perfection. She called me combative, said I'd endangered children and pets with hostile landscaping, accused me of aggression through intimidation. Her voice trembled just enough, fake emotion wrapped in bureaucracy. Then it was my turn. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. I walked to the podium and laid out 3 folders. The first held copies of the original survey. My father's no easement. The second contained the county's plat map modification, with a forged signature, highlighted in red. The third, the USDA correspondence confirming that my land was now in active review for federal conservation protection. I looked up. I didn't start this fight, I said. But I won't roll over when someone tries to steal my land with a pen and a smile. Silence. Madeline stood again, voice sharper now. Mr. Mallory is misrepresenting the situation. Easement was submitted properly. It passed board review. He was notified. I turned to the crowd. Did anyone here see that notification? Heads turned, eyes avoided mine. And then a voice broke through the hush. I didn't vote for that easement. Every head whipped around. It was Daniel Pike, a name I hadn't heard in months, former board treasurer, resigned quietly last spring. He stood near the back, gray hair slicked back, wearing an old veteran's cap and a scowl that meant business. Daniel stepped forward. I was on the board when Madeline pushed that path through. Told us it was already approved, said the county signed off. When I asked to see the deed, she said it was being processed. She didn't have it. Madeline's face paled. Daniel went on. We never saw Evan's signature. We were told it was just a formality. I stepped down when I realized we were steamrolling private rights for convenience. Gasps rippled through the room. Even the other board members shifted uncomfortably. The gavel hit again. The board president cleared his throat. We'll be calling an internal review, effective immediately. Madeline opened her mouth to object, but nothing came out. Just a half-formed protest, swallowed by the weight of too many eyes. She sat back down. I didn't smile, just gathered my folders and returned to my seat. Calm, grounded. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. And for the first time, they weren't just hearing me. They were listening. She wasn't just building shortcuts, she was building empires, one lie at a time. After the meeting, something in the air shifted. Madeline still showed up at HOA events, still wore her pearls and her polished smiles, but the cracks were beginning to show. She'd blink longer in interviews. Her voice had that edge, the kind that comes when control is slipping through your fingers. And the whispers? They were getting louder. It was Daniel Pike who first gave me the thread. She's got a long game, he said over coffee at the diner one morning. That easement was just a piece of it. You ever wonder who's behind all this Ridgeview expansion? I did, but I'd never asked out loud. Her husband, Daniel continued. Colin Crane. Real estate development. Quiet. Corporate. Clean. He's not on any HOA paperwork, but he's everywhere else. Zoning meetings. Permit requests. Bids on land before the ink's dry. It hit me like a shovel to the gut. Madeline wasn't just a meddling neighbor or an overzealous HOA president. She was the face of something bigger, something calculated. So I started digging again. This time, not in the ground, but through county development records, zoning applications, and contractor filings. I found the company name, Clearline Property Group, and followed it like a trail of breadcrumbs. LLCs masked under other LLCs. Shell companies buying land just before zoning changes, but the kicker was the Ridgeview Phase 2 expansion. Originally, the new phase was supposed to run into an empty field just west of mine. According to records, Clearline had claimed it was secured, but the county still listed the parcel as privately held, under an old trust that had never sold. They didn't own it, but they'd planned as if they did. And they needed my land as a buffer. A shortcut. A foothold. That's when I got the call. A blocked number. A gravelly voice. Said he used to work for Colin Crane. I built the foundations for the first Ridgeview houses, he told me. Quit when I realized what they were doing. He wouldn't give a name, but he gave me something better. A burner email account with files attached. Screenshots. Internal communications. One thread between Madeline and her husband stood out. I told the board it was pre-approved. If we wait for Evan to sign, it'll kill momentum. We just need the county map adjusted. We'll clean it up after the next phase breaks ground. Another message. Once the path is normalized, public access becomes precedent. He won't have legal legs. It was all there. Manipulation, deception, strategy. And I was the mark. I sat on my porch that night, staring at the old oak tree near the pasture line. It used to be my dad's favorite spot. He'd string a hammock between the trunks, sip sweet tea, and read survey maps like they were novels. His words echoed again, land doesn't fight back. But you can. He was right. Land can't talk, can't scream, can't plead when someone redraws its lines behind closed doors. But I could. The next morning, I printed every email, every record, every plat discrepancy. I walked them into the county assessor's office, the zoning board, and the district court. And then I did the one thing they didn't expect from the quiet farmer with thorn bushes. I filed a civil lawsuit. Fraud. Easement abuse. Intentional encroachment. Not for show. Not for vengeance, but for truth. Let them twist my image on TV. Let them grumble about the angry man with signs. Because I'd seen behind the fence now. And the woman smiling on the other side. She wasn't protecting a neighborhood. She was trying to build a kingdom on someone else's soil. Not anymore. 3 weeks after I filed the civil suit, the HOA folded. Not publicly, of course. They wrapped it in language that kept everything polite. A mutual resolution reached to preserve community harmony. But I didn't need headlines to know what happened behind those closed conference room doors. The easement was revoked. The plat map was corrected. The path that had once carved through my pasture like an open wound was now officially, legally, permanently closed. And Madeline, she resigned. Personal reasons, the announcement read. No fanfare, no explanation, just a few lines in the HOA newsletter, and a half-hearted farewell reception at the clubhouse that I'm told was more awkward than celebratory. The thorn bushes stayed. I let them grow wild now, over the old path like ivy, over a forgotten road. They're not just plants anymore. They're boundaries and reminders, a living message, in root and branch. This land protects itself now. The USDA finalized the conservation easement a few days after the settlement. I walked the perimeter with the same agent who'd first visited the place months earlier. He smiled at the growth, took pictures, and handed me the final certificate. Most folks don't fight this hard to protect what they have, he said. I didn't say much in return. Just nodded and looked out over the land. It felt whole again. Later that week, the local paper ran a story. The farmer who fought the HOA and won. They'd snapped a photo of me near the gate. Arms crossed, signs behind me, a proud but tired smile on my face. People around town started recognizing me. Strangers waved. A few even thanked me. But I didn't care about the attention. Not really, because none of them saw the long nights. The quiet rage, the silent prayers under a porch light that flickered like it was hanging on with me. They saw the headline. I lived the war. And now, finally, I had peace. One evening, near sunset, I walked the back line of the property. No joggers, no bikes, no sound but the rustle of thorn leaves and the occasional chirp of a brave field sparrow nesting nearby. I paused at the edge of the trail that wasn't a trail anymore. Ran my hand over a sign that now stood more like a monument than a warning. The wind carried a memory, my father's voice, clear and steady. You don't inherit land, Evan. You borrow it from those who fought for it before you. And you defend it for the ones who will come next. I closed my eyes and let the weight of it all settle. The lawsuits, the lies, the anger. Gone now. What remained was the dirt under my boots. The stubborn fence posts, still holding strong. The sound of nothing, no footsteps where they shouldn't be. That was victory. Not loud, not proud, just rooted. Just real. They thought they could rewrite my land. But they forgot I was raised to protect it. The thorn bushes are blooming now. Small red berries, tucked between the thick green sharp edges, still guarding them like sentinels. They grew fast, faster than I expected. Maybe they felt the fight in the soil too. Maybe roots remember. Most mornings I walk the trail alone. Not the one they tried to force, but a new one I made myself, curving gently along the eastern fence line, where the sun filters through the old oaks and the grass still smells like morning dew. It's narrow, private, meant for boots that know the land, not strangers cutting corners. And when my kids visit, we walk it together. My youngest, Nora, calls it the secret path. She picks up acorns and asks if the thorn bushes are the guards. I tell her yes. She smiles like she understands more than I think she does. It's funny. I'm not angry anymore. Not at the HOA, not at Madeline, not even at the ones who used to walk through my fields like I didn't exist. They taught me something. Not about law or paperwork or politics, though I learned more about those than I ever wanted to. No. What they really taught me was that peace isn't something you inherit. You don't get it by default. You fight for it. You build it. You plant it like a seed, guard it like a crop, and sometimes you bleed for it when people try to take it away. That lesson, like most good ones, came from my father first. I can still see him kneeling in the dirt near the fence line, hands rough with calluses and covered in soil. He was planting a fig tree, said it wouldn't bear fruit for years. But that wasn't the point. You plant it anyway, he told me, because it'll shade someone you love later. Even if it's not you. That's what legacy really is. It's not the land, not the deeds, not even the trees or the fences. It's the fight, the care, the refusal to give up when someone shows up with a pen and a smile and tries to convince you that what's yours should be shared for their convenience. They can pave around me. They can redraw the maps and sell their stories. But they'll never know this land the way I do. They'll never understand what it means to rise with it, break sweat into its soil, bury your grief in it, and let it bloom into something worth passing down. This place has scars now. Some visible, like the twisted wire on the north line, I haven't gotten around to fixing. Others, not so much. But they're part of it. Part of me. And I wouldn't erase them, even if I could. The berries from the thorn bushes aren't edible. I don't care. Their beauty is enough. They weren't meant to feed. They were meant to defend. And they did. Better than most fences ever could. I leave one sign still standing. Faded now, the edges curled from sun and wind. Private property, no trespassing, USDA protected. Not because I need it anymore. Because it reminds me that land doesn't belong to the powerful. Not the ones with connections, or committees, or corporate filings. It belongs to those who show up every day, through storms, and courtrooms, and silence, and care enough to fight for it. I'm not just my father's son anymore. I'm my children's father. And they'll know how to plant things that last. Right here, where legacy takes root. If you've ever had something stolen in plain sight, if you know what it means to fight quietly for what's rightfully yours, then you already understand Evan's story. Stick around. We're just getting to the roots of what people will do for power, and what one man will do to stop them.